Good morning. I'm hoping you can hear me.
Sound is good on our side.
Great. Thanks,
morning.
Bjorn, for that. Great. Thanks,
Can
colleagues.
you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good morning and welcome to our third roundtable. This has really been a huge undertaking from a SABS perspective. It's been the first of the roundtables that we've been hosting in 2023, and this focus on the third roundtable is that in the civil industry. Again, our theme is very much that of standardization and quality assurance reimagined. My name is Dinesh Naidu. I'm the acting divisional head for customer partnering within SABS, and I'll also be your program manager for today. I have a strong panel that's available to us today, and what I'd like to do is allow each of the panel members to just switch on their cameras and just briefly give an introduction to themselves. We'll start with Rodney. Rodney, over to you.
Yes, morning to everyone, and thanks for the opportunity. Rodney Mulford, Chair of Technical Committee 60, dealing with the standards that fall under the National Building Regulations.
Great, thanks, Rodney. Over to you, Ismail.
Good morning, thank you, Chair. My name is Ismail Kasim. I'm with the CIDB, and I'm also the Chair for the TC 1098 at SABS. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot for that. Prasant, I'm not sure if you are able to get your camera on at the moment. Prasant, over to you.
Is it on?
No, we're not seeing it, but we can hear you, Prasant, so you can continue to just do a short introduction.
So it's Prasant Mohan. I'm a Chief Director, Roads Infrastructure at the National Department of Transport. We're doing monitoring, oversight, and roads administration. There's funds that we give to provinces, municipalities, and SANRAL for road construction and maintenance. I'm also a member of TCs at SABS, Road Traffic Management Systems, and the recently conformity assessments. I'm also a lead auditor for construction management systems, asset management systems, SACTA registered. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much for that, Prasant. Prasant, if you can just double check on your end, we're not seeing your camera, but you can try that while the rest of the colleagues are doing the introductions. Thanks, Prasant. I see Katima's on the call. Katima, over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Katima Temba, head of the certification division within the SABS. And thank you and welcome. Thanks, Dinesh.
Thank you, Katima. Matlale, over to you.
Thanks, Dinesh, and good morning to everyone. My name is Matlale Peter. I'm the acting head of the Standards Division at the SABS. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Matlale. Thabo, over to you.
Thank you, Dinesh, and good morning, colleagues. My name is Thabo Sepuru. I'm the head of laboratory services at the SABS, and thank you.
Great, thanks, Thabo. Maybe just from an apology perspective, the Chief Operating Officer of SABS, Lungelo, will be joining us a little later in the day itself. So we'll certainly allow him to then come in when he joins us. But at this point, I'd like to possibly then proceed with the program itself. Maybe just from a housekeeping perspective, the one aspect is that of, I think Bjorn has covered that. Where there are questions or input, please utilize the chat bar, and we'll certainly address those particular issues. What you'll also find is that the session is going to be recorded. So with your permission, we'll then share the recording with those that have attended the session as well. Then the last point is at the latter part of the roundtable engagement itself, we will open the floor to questions. We'll take some of the questions that come up in the chat bar, but we'll also then open up the system itself so that you can raise questions directly. You can engage with some of the panelists, and we can certainly then turn this into more of a two-way engagement itself. But with that said, I'd like to kick off the program itself. And I really want to start, Rodney, on your end. Maybe just as some questions, you are involved in our technical committees. You're also a chair of our technical committees. And I'd like you to in your feedback, share with us some of the experiences you have as a technical committee member and as the chair. What works, what sometimes doesn't work, and then possibly to share some of the experiences you've had with your specific technical committees and the contribution that it might be making in this particular area of construction and the civil industry. So Rodney, with that said, I'd like to allocate you, some time to talk through this and share your experiences with the panel itself. Over to you.
Okay, thanks very much for that opportunity. And I do notice, if I look at the list of the participants here, I do notice that Frans Dekker is one of the participants, and Frans and I go back a long way and worked on many committees, and we've got to share the same experiences, rewards, and also, some of the pain. I've been involved in standards for pretty much my whole career, about 30 years. Firstly at the CSIR and then subsequently at the CIDB. I've been committee members, I've been coordinators on various committees, and now I'm chairing TC60, which looks after the standards which fall under the National Building Regulation. And in reflecting on that, by law, but there are some exclusions, by law, every building has to comply with the National Building Regulations. It is usually done through the deemed to satisfy parts of the standard. So the scope and the influence of these standards, I believe, is very significant. Just sharing some of the challenges and where are we? As I said, I've been involved for about 30 years in this. It's been a very rewarding period, and would encourage other people to participate. We do face a challenge that the average age in some of these committees, the average age of the people around the table is 70 to 80 years old. So that's not sustainable going into the future, and we've got to get new participants onto it. Now, reflecting back on my experience, none of my participation on these committees would have been possible if it was not for the institutional support I received. In other words, the CSIR backed me up, the CIDB backed me up, and I would encourage industry to back their staff to participate in these. The benefits in participating in standards is broad. It's individual growth. I've grown tremendously. I've interacted with many excellent people over the period. I would like to believe that the organizations I've worked for have benefited from it as well, and certainly the industry benefits. So it's a broad thing, but it needs institutional support to take one there. Just a few comments as we go down. What are we currently dealing with? It's been pretty busy times. Some of the standards which have been a bit difficult or have taken a lot of time is the fire standard 10400 Part T. Frans Dekker has been chairing the one on the disability. That's also come to, will be published shortly. And also Frans and others have been involved in this Part A, with the administrative aspects. So those are pretty much the standards that we've been dealing with over the past year. There's many others which have, but they are pretty stable now. But we do have some challenges. And if I spoke just now about we need institutional support for individuals to participate, but we also need institutional support from government. In our particular case, the standards are called up in regulation. Now, we published, many of you may be aware, we have a standard 10400 XA, which deals with energy efficiency. Industry wanted it, and in fact, DTRC wanted it. We also produced a water efficiency standard, which was supposed to become 10400 XB. It has not become 10400 XB because of the difficulty and the long-winded process of changing regulation. We want to change the scope of 10 Part W, which deals with water and that. But we cannot do so until we have agreement from government of the process of regulation. So I think I call on industry to support the growth of staff, things like that. I call on SABS and government to support as well. There's a very big role there. Minor issues, or maybe of interest, certainly not minor issues that we're dealing with at the moment. In TC60, we have started up a new working group dealing with container housing, where you turn these containers into housing. It's a cheap and affordable and comfortable way of doing it. I see they've been used as shopping, things like that. We're also dealing with what is called this Category 1 issue. Going back years ago, Agrimar South Africa introduced the man tag. That's where all your key standards, you have to satisfy fire, you have to satisfy structural, you have to satisfy all those safety issues. But you can lower the standard around durability, lower the standard around deflection. You can withstand some cracking. But there's been a bit of a hiccup, whereas in all the standards, a Category 1 building is limited to a height of 2 stories. In the fire code, it's limited to a height of 1 story. So de facto, it only applies to 1-story buildings. We're trying to unravel that one. So that will be taking us forward. Just another comment, where should we be going under TC60? And I think this whole issue of BIM building information modeling is important. I see SABS has adopted the ISO 19650, Part 1 and Part 2, but Part 2 is not on the web. And SABS is trying to find out why. These things happen, so I'm not knocking anyone. But that building information modeling is going to be important as we get to the stage where, as in many countries, your building plans have to be submitted electronically. That will lay the foundation. I'm sure Ishmael can talk about it, and also building information modeling is used extensively in the civil industry. So we need to start integrating that. In asset management, it's a core component for asset management. Let me pause there. I'm welcome to come back to the issues, but it's been a very rewarding experience, but we need to continue and we need to rejuvenate the participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Rodney. And, if I can just take a few seconds to summarize some of the key points, and there's, I think almost everything that you've highlighted are key points. But if I can just take out the salient points, the potential skills gap that we're going to face, especially with the fact that 70 to 80 years, is the current age group of those that are participating. So how do we bring the young entrants in? I think it's key. The point you flagged around institutional support, and I think we can leave that as a broad term. It's a message that needs to get out there. And it's only possible, like you've rightfully said, without organizations providing the right level of support and understanding the key role that we play in these processes, these can collapse in the future. So it really, really requires that institutional support, and the close linkage to government support, I think, is certainly there. But there's something you said, and I think my colleague who heads up our standards division, the divisional head, is going to be very excited about what you've highlighted and how you've put it across. And it's something that he tries to, and we try to, as an organization, try to educate the public on. But the message doesn't go out as clearly. And you use these words very strongly. You said, we publish standards. And it's so important as a concept in the way you've put it across, because far too often there's a perception that it's SABS that does this. It's that SABS is writing this. But you clearly have articulated that as the working group, as the TC, it's the work that's done by this group. And really SABS plays a facilitation role. So it's about taking this ownership. And I think you've articulated that so well. So certainly, I think my colleague is going to come in shortly when he gives his views, and he's going to highlight that very point as well. So I'm going to pause there. But in saying this, Rodney, you've already touched on almost the linkage to the role that CIDB plays. And so I'd like to maybe invite Ismail to come in next to really share this role, the encouraging that CIDB encouragement that CIDB plays in making sure that standards are being used, but more importantly the various touch points, because you will find that there are touch points to SANES, there's touch points to other organizations, and I'm hoping that Ismail will cover those aspects to possibly take us down this journey and to let us understand that it's about end-to-end processes and not just one activity. So with that said, Ismail, if you can put on your camera, and if I can offer you the opportunity to share your experiences and the role that CIDB plays as well. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Ismail Kasim, as you have introduced me. I am with the CIDB in the program called Performance Improvement. So it gels very well with our theme today. I'm also wearing another hat, that is the chairperson of TC 1098. That is the Buildings and Civil Engineering Works. So for me, my view and input is about the strong link between the CIDB, which is government, and the standards which SABS publish. And I would like to take you through the process or the standards that the CIDB is currently using and those that we are envisaged to use in the future. If one looks at procurement, for example, like Rodney said, I've got to also give due to Rodney in terms of all the standards, or most of the standards, or the schemes that we're discussing today. Rodney, while being at the CIDB, he conceptualized most of the standards and the schemes, and we are continuing what he has sort of started. So what we're looking at is we're looking at a very strong link between the CIDB initiatives and that of TC 1098. And I will use, for example, if one looks at procurement, the standard for procurement, that is 10845, has a number of parts. And for example, part 1 to 4 is reflected in the standard for uniformity of the CIDB, which is mandated to all sectors of government, all spheres of government, and all public sector clients. That is a mandated requirement. So that is what the CIDB is using. So it's not just the standard, like I said, the SABS published standards, but in this particular case is we as industry, we need to apply those standards. So for example, if one looks at the procurement and the use where CIDB comes in, if you look at part 1 to 4, that is basically the formulation of your procurement documents, how to forward tenders and the like. And then the latter parts of 5 to 8, that deals with the area, for example, that is a very silent one. It is the contract participation goals. As we are aware, the construction infrastructure plays a huge role in terms of the socio-economic upliftment of our country. And this particular part of the SANS 845 is dealing with those socio-economic issues, for example, partnerships, subcontracting, community involvement, incident limits, and those type of things. So that is what we're using it, and the standard for that have developed that is the contract participation goals. So these standards are very valuable to the CIDB and as opposed to all of industry role plays. So that deals with the procurement. Another one that is also touching on procurement is the anti-bribery management system. That is the SANS 1734. What we have added to that is also the fraud to that. And we are planning to introduce that as a recognition to contractors, but only the larger contractors for now. So that is your grade 9. Those are for contracts above 200 million rand. Because it's quite a complex standard for now to introduce. But as we introduce these, we will sort of learn and then we will sort of cascade it. So that is in terms of the procurement regime, where we're talking about the application of 10845. The other one is what we are looking at introducing and also improving the performance of the construction industry. And in this particular case, I will focus more on the construction process part. The civil engineering, the professions are fairly well established in terms of using the standards. And what we are introducing is the construction management systems. In this case, it's a local one, which integrates your quality, environmental, and health and safety management. That's a South African version. And then we also, as you have the SANS 9001, the 14,001 and 45,001 that deal with the respective management. So, but for us, we with industry and SANS or SABS, we've developed our own local SAN construction management system. So what we intend doing with that is we are looking at requiring or introducing that to our contractors from a certain grade, the medium size. For example, in this case, the grade 5 to a grade 9 contractors, that's your largest one. So then to introduce and apply these standards. And that is where I see the link, strong link between the CIDB industry and SABS. But with that also comes, it's a new standard. So therefore, we also facilitate the accreditation scheme with SANAS. By that is we are working with SANAS to develop and for them to have the protocol, establish the protocol for certification bodies to be accredited to the SANS CNS 1393. We're also working with them facilitating the accreditation of certification bodies with a scheme for the anti-bribery management system, which is the 1734. So that we have this end-to-end, like we mentioned earlier, that we have the full spectrum of the requirements, the application, the certification, and then we have the industry, which is now the certification bodies. So we're working on that particular aspect. But what I also want to bring to the colleagues' attention is through these, particularly in the municipal space, if one looks at TC 1098, and one component of that, which is quite a wide component, that is your SANS 2001 series, which covers buildings and civil engineering works. Now, if one looks at and I'm just zooming into the municipal infrastructure, they have, in this particular year, they have above a budget of above 70 billion rand. And just to give the colleagues an idea of how these standards can be applied. And with us, in terms of focusing on the construction processes, dealing with the contractors, how we now pushing the envelope in terms of improvement of quality, environment, and having a safe environment. So that is where the CIDB is moving towards this, the application of the standard, using it and actively participating in the end-to-end process and facilitate and engage industry regarding that. Those are the main points regarding the involvement. From that perspective, I will just quickly go into the future, where we see the future as a CIDB as well as a TC. We're looking at, Rodney mentioned the book, that's the Building Information Modeling, which is quite applied, widely applied internationally. We are looking at introducing a best practice, depending on industry's input, to introduce BIM in the construction industry. Where we are now, we're working with TC 267 with SABS, that is the facilitation or facilities management, where we are now developing within the NRCS. That is a regional or South African country-based model or a guideline to implement the 19650. So that is where we are currently now. We're working towards that to set a base to make it easier for the industry before we introduce the standard. What we are also involved in is in terms of the circular economy, in terms of construction and demolition waste, in terms of the sustainability issue that we talk about, the 2400X. We're looking at, for example, what can we do with construction and demolition waste in terms of, as we know, these are 20% of the landfill sites are filled by these. And government is working towards finding a solution to this. Rodney's mentioned, for example, the Agrima, which are now also introducing the certification of certain products that use, for example, these construction demolition waste, for example, concrete and bricks and those type of things. Then we can talk about a lot of other things, but today, I think for the discussions, we can talk about, for example, climate change, those type of issues, the future that we're looking at. We can look at, for example, alternative technologies. We can look at, for example, as 3D printing. That is the way that the technology and the world is moving towards in terms of the future. We're also looking in terms of drones, for example, using drones for inspection in high-rise buildings, for instance. For a typical example in the civil engineering is we used to take ground levels using very primitive methods. Now we can use drones, for example, to use, and these are all technologies that will tie in with your geometric, your GIS, for example, and your BIM models. So that is the future that we are looking at. And there are quite a number of other initiatives which we will probably discuss in the panel. Thank you, Chair.
Ismail, thank you very much for that. I think again, some of the work you guys are doing within CIDB is so closely linked to the work that SABS does. It's so, there's strong synergies that are coming through. You've certainly highlighted the importance of using standards, and I think that came out quite clearly. Some of the key points you've touched on, the anti-bribery and fraud, these are just things that we're going to get right, not just as a mandate for yourselves within CIDB, but it benefits the country if we can get this right. So a lot of the initiatives talks about South Africa benefiting and the role that we can play in this regard. You went into the future, and it really excited me. You referred to the acronym BIMS, or the Building Information Management. You also spoke about work around facilities management, but as you closed, you touched on 3D printing and the use of drones, and it almost links me, Ismail, I was tempted to ask my colleague from the standard side to come in next, but I think it'll be more fitting if I'd rather just pause and allow Prasant to come in. Prasant has recently prepared a paper on digitization. It almost talks and touches on the 3D printing, use of drones, and probably other aspects that will be of interest to us. So Prasant, if I can allow you to come in and maybe take us through, at a very high level, digitization, but to give you an opportunity to share some of the work you've been involved in. Over to you, Prasant.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Prasant, we can hear you. We're not able to see you. Give me a moment.
Yeah,
maybe
it's
just. All right, but let's proceed. We can certainly hear you,
Yeah,
so we can proceed.
that.
That's great.
Good morning
Thanks,
to
Prasant.
everyone, and thank you for inviting us to be part of this roundtable. I think I want to link it to something I saw when the original invitation came, was about reimagining SABS. I want to just say it shouldn't be just reimagining SABS, reimagining a whole lot of key stakeholders, which involves sector departments, CIDB, and other SOCs, where we can collaborate and work together. And that's where we need to start. I think that's very important. I also am involved in a project with regards the 1393 construction management systems and the asset management systems, which I think is very critical to drive the agenda going forward. If you look at the monies we're spending for roads and the value we're getting from the money, there's no correlation. So asset management systems is a key instrument we're looking at. And secondly, we need to get value from the service providers. So we work closely with the CIDB on construction management systems, where the vision is for the grade 4 and above to get compliant or certified against asset management systems. So I thought I wanted to start there. With regards to the work I did, it was not a paper as such, it was a literature review exercise I did as part of my honors. And there I looked at different
Prasant, we have lost your voice. Your mic is. Okay, it looks like Prasant's connection has failed us. This could be due to load shedding. Dinesh?
Bjorn, I think what I'd like to propose is that maybe you can engage Prasant and maybe we can get him to come in again. But in the interim, so that we utilize the time, we'll allow Prasant to come back in because he certainly touched on, I think he's almost whet our appetite with some on the literature review that he alluded to. And I think we all want to get a little bit more information on that. So let's allow maybe Prasant to work behind the scenes and see if he can resolve that issue. Bjorn, if you can contact him. But in the meantime, I'm going to allow Matlale, if Matlale, who heads up our standards division, to allow him to come in. Bjorn, are you okay with that?
Sorted. I will do that.
Great. Thank you so much. Matlale, over to you. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Dinesh, and to the colleagues that have already spoken. I think sometimes it's very difficult if you speak after the other speakers have spoken, because then how you wanted to approach your opening remarks completely changes, because then you want to align with how the discussion is going to go. But first, let me just acknowledge that, you know, this industry, the civil engineering and standardization in this industry, you know, dates back, I think, since the SABS was established many, many years ago. This is one of the areas that was focused on in terms of standardization. Participation over the years has then been changing depending on where one would say, where does the interest lie? You know, Dr. Melfort has quoted some of the standards that they've been busy with: 10400, your party, your XA, your XB that was supposed to come out under, you know, addressing the water efficiency. So when one looks into even participation in the development of 10400 party, that at some point you would think that the working group is a TC. And when you try to say, but the working group is supposed to at least just have a few individuals dealing with it, the subject, you know, subject matter experts, then you cannot really curtail it, because you are saying there's a principle of standardization that say there is openness, those who've got interest must participate. But at what level do you then say we would then cut? Which then leads me to my other point that says, maybe to the colleagues on the platform, to say we have been revising our norm for the development of standards. We are dealing with the comments that came through, and we should be able to publish the document. And one would call the likes of the late Folly Brink, who used to also have an issue of saying, but we cannot be sitting as a working group, as experts, developing a draft for the consideration of the committee. And then we have other people who are not necessarily expert. So we've tried to address that in the draft document, where we say, if there's any doubt that certain individuals may not have the necessary expertise, the SABS might ask them to say, can we see your CV? After the committee would then have nominated you to serve in those committees. So we are trying to tighten there so that we don't even waste the committee's time. Because what you are looking at is that, you know, standards remain relevant if they can be delivered as quickly as possible. Chairperson, I think this roundtable also comes at the right time, when we yesterday had a session with the BRICS heads of standards, or the BRICS NSB's heads, and we look into even one of the BRICS members who said, 2 years ago, it took us about 24 months to develop a standard and deliver it to industry. And yesterday they said, as of 2023, which is this year, it takes about 7.9 months to develop a standard from beginning to end. And everybody was saying, wow, how did you do that? And they say, through the use of smart technologies, you know, this online standard development, we were able to achieve this. And we said this is of interest, and this is something that we're going to look into as the SABS, as we are now embarking on another process that is called, or where we are now talking about smart standards. And smart standards will also address, Chair, what this particular committees, your TC60, and other committees have been complaining about, where they would even, I think we even used the 10400 Part T as an example. So for you to be able to apply 10400 Part T, it will have your normative references. And so you need to also have copies of these documents to be able to apply this. But those documents will also refer you to other documents, and those documents will refer you to other documents, which then the users of the standards would then start to complain to say, but then at what point do you then cut off? Or when do we then have access to such? Because then it becomes somehow costly to apply such standard. And we said, as we are studying where the world is going with these smart standard, it will make it easy, because then you can then have access to the data as a user of the standard. As an example, you would just have a copy of 10400 Part T. So where 10400 Part T then refers you to another document, and they refer you to a particular clause in the document, you are able through smart standards to only have access to such. And let's say, and I'm just going to use figures, you know, just randomly. So instead of having paid 100 rands to have a copy of that other standard, that normative reference, SABS could just say, no, you just have to pay us 10 rands. Then you'll have access to that relevant data. So it's an exciting thing for us. Of course, it will take us some time because we have to go through various stages. Currently, as we know, you can only have our documents in PDF format or the hard copy. That's how you'll have access to our documents. We are aiming, Chairperson, that all systems, if everything is in order, that by 2024, which is next year, we would have at least started with converting our documents from PDF to what they call XML, which then are preparing us to go to smart standards. But with XML, at least you then have access to data that we are talking about. We believe it's possible, Chair, because again, if I refer to the session we had yesterday with the BRICS member countries, that one of the members said, we've got a collection of 39,000 standards, and we've been able to convert all of them now to XML. Now, if you compare that to our collection, which is just about 7,500, we are saying actually it is possible, but there are a lot of other things that needs to happen to get us to where we want to go with that. Let me also then touch, Chair, on the cooperation, and I'm going back to some of the comments that were made by Dr. Milford with regards to especially water efficiency XP. That if we don't work together between different entities, meaning ourselves as SABS, where through our technical committees, we then develop standards that provide a technical solution. You then need to have local authorities as part of that as well, to say, how do we then take this technical solution into our regulations? And then thereafter, the implementation of such and access to such documents, as I've said, including what a lot of people have now been challenging us to say, but you guys keep leaving out NCC, and NCC plays a crucial role as well, because if one goes to the Consumer Protection Act, they also made a bold statement that consumers have got a right to receive a product and services, and I'm paraphrasing here, that complies with standards as developed by the SABS. So that is also then a key stakeholder that we need to bring closer and say, when we are having these discussions and say, how do we cover everything together? Where do you fit in? The likes of Agroma, that when such discussions are taking place, Agroma South Africa needs to be part of that. And I've heard that, and I saw in the charts, there's reference to now these container housing, which we've approved a new work item proposal as SABS not long ago for the development of such standards to do with container housing. And we don't know if Agroma does not actively get involved. Will they still refer to those container housing as just modified shacks, and where they would say, but this is not conventional, buildings as we know them. But if you don't bring them onto the discussion now and they only come later, then they get to frustrate your stakeholders who said we spent time and resources developing these standards, and then we are hitting this brick wall where they cannot be implemented because then they are classified as non-conventional. So it is that discussions that needs to take place to make it easier for the implementation of these standards. And maybe, Chair, just in my closing, just to also reflect on the civil engineering test methods that are being brought forward, that we still have in our collection documents called SABS 1200 series. Many years ago, I think it dates now over 15 years, where there was a resolution of the committee to say we are going to develop 2001s to replace the 1200 series. And not all of them have been done. We still have on our collection, and really we can't even withdraw them. And I know there was even a big debate within committees to say, we used to have measurement and payment as the old 1200 series. In the new documents, the 2001s, that has fallen away. So you still have industry that is sort of divided, where others say that used to help us a lot, and others are saying, but that does not belong in the modern standards. We cannot cover those. That we would then say to our committees, at some point, we need to then do something about those 1200s. We can't withdraw them, as I've already said, because they're still being used. I mean, when we do our systematic reviews that we do every 5 years, and we look into how many of copies of these standards have been sold, and we come up that maybe in the past 5 years, if we're looking at this one, not even one single copy has been sold. Yet the market say to us, but you can't withdraw them until you've developed your 2001. So they then create that bit of a problem. So we're saying, as the committees are looking into the future standards and other standards, we will have to also then close that chapter of the 1200s. Thank you very much. I will pause there until we then start the debate. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Matlale. There's so much you've covered, but I think the one thing that we all look forward to, and those on the call, members of the public, is it's all about how we make access to standards easier and cheaper. And I think this plan, or this thought process of making the relevant parts of standards available, hence making it cheaper, is certainly something that we need to explore. We need to accelerate that process. It's certainly going to add value as we go forward. The other key point around the time to launch a standard, I think that's just brilliant, the work that's already taken place. But it links us again. So whether we started with Prasant or we moved back to him, it seems to be all going back into the direction of what are we doing from the aspect of the issue around digitization. You've already touched on the fact that it's through those processes that we've been able to improve our timelines and to get standards released quicker. So I'm not sure, Prasant, if you are available and you are still able to come in. Bjorn, you want to just advise on that? Over to you.
Yeah, I've contacted Prasant. Prasant, can you try maybe again from your side? No. Dinesh,
I'm not seeing. Yeah.
No, he's logged out completely. So I think his connection went completely. Thank you.
All right. So it seems to be like the colleagues have highlighted. I think the levels of the load shedding is really getting to all of us. But I think with that said, Bjorn, if you can possibly just make an attempt behind the scenes Katima, if you are comfortable, I think it will be fitting if we can move across to the certification space. Katima, over to you. Katima, you're currently on mute. Oh, there we go. You were on mute. All right, great, thanks.
You just caught me off guard. I was just starting to apply some makeup. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Dinesh, and good morning, everyone on the call. I think it was very interesting, really, to also pick up on what Mark spoken to and Ishmael, and I was equally looking forward to hear what Prasant had to say, you know. But I think I will also equally try to align to some of the issues that the two gentlemen have spoken to. So as I introduce myself, my name is Katima Temba, head of the certification division here at South African Bureau of Standards. Among other things, we do responsible for product certification, where we affix the mark products that you see around that have an SABS mark is the work that we do here. Among other things, management system certification, popular standards will be your ISO 9001 and so on. I'll talk about a few of those in a moment. Local content verification, it's the work that we do, including consignment inspections within the certification division. But you know, Dinesh, before I maybe touch on a few issues and colleagues that I want to share in the meeting, I came across an article published last year, November 2022. So I'm not sure, as I was reading it, they were interviewing the CEO of Cement and Concrete in SA. But what caught my attention in all of this, in this article, it makes reference to the industry overall being under threat, among other things, is the economic decline of the sector overall. This is one of the challenges that is also impacting the sector, including cheap imports that are coming into the country, and environmental related issues. This is an industry, from what I read and picked up, employs about 35,000 individuals in the country, which are local jobs. So imagine with these challenges that are facing this sector, if anything were to go wrong, really there's a lot at stake in terms of a number of job losses. But also one of the key issues that was also shared in this article was the carbon footprint of the sector, because it seemed to be a significant issue, and there are efforts to really look at those things to really make sure that how is this environment also work towards net zero carbon by 2050. So these are the things that I managed to pick up in that article. So why I started there is because I'm saying, from the SABS perspective, as I listened to the other two gentlemen, immediately it occurred to me that there is a need for us as panelists sitting here, and I think Prasant also touched on the issue when he was just about to speak on the importance of collaboration. How do we then advance collaboration? But I want to underscore that, emphasizing for the people we are servicing from a SABS perspective, including other role players, be it CIDB, be it Department of Transport, and so on. The big question that collectively we need to reflect on is the cost of compliance and the cost of compliance in the market. And SABS has a role to play, and it has its own mandate, and it's focusing on other things. And similarly, so is the CIDB and anybody else that is involved in this value chain. But why I'm saying that is Mark emphasized issues around energy efficiency. And from a SABS perspective, we also have management systems where we are certifying the space of energy management. And equally now, we also want to venture into energy inspection performance in buildings. So I see that as a synergy, and I'm trying to make these connections from what was spoken to. Ishmael spoken to also a number of issues, and among others, he also highlighted issues of socio-economic issues that are also impacted by this specific sector. And the issue of advancing industrialization from a policy perspective at a government level, from a SABS perspective, we see ourselves playing a role in this regard, in the context of local content verification, because Ishmael emphasized procurement standards that are also applicable that they have in this specific environment. And I'm sitting here, I'm saying, how do we then collaborate with the likes of CIDB in also advancing issues of socio-economic issues, but coming through one of the instruments that bestowed upon us through the DTIC, which is local content verification services, to really establish and really make sure that whenever this procurement is taking place, really beneficiation and the principles of localization are really taking place wherever this procurement is taking place. So this is one of the issues that I picked up also when Ishmael also spoken to. He further also, Ishmael emphasized the issue of anti-bribery. I keep on making reference because I'm reflecting on the services that we are rendering. And I think if I heard it correctly, it's SANS 1734. And on the other hand, there's also, I'm curious to know how is it aligned to 37,001 anti-bribery standard. That is already a standard that we have in our possession as one of the adopted standard through ISO. And the readiness of SABS since 2018 around there, in the provision of providing training, including certification services in this regard. I see that as a possible handshake on how some of these things we can really collaborate in that regard. There are other issues that they were also spoken to, and again, were also emphasized by Ishmael on the importance of the environmental issues, occupational health and safety requirements, etc. So as much as those things are important, that's why I make the statement to say collectively, if we reflect and say, how do we then reflect on this question of cost of compliance to the users, to the industry we are servicing? Because in my mind, I'm saying if a company is 14,001 certified by SABS, relatively speaking, to what percentage does that company meet the requirements? Can those requirements or demonstrated compliance to 14,001 or 45,001, which is occupational health and safety, can it satisfy the requirements of CIDB or any other interested party? And it brings in this question of cost of compliance that I'm talking to say there's a need as we collaborate and say, where is this point of intersection in terms of these services that we are rendering? And collectively and say, how can we really draw from the capacity and capability of each other, which will really, in my view, reduce this cost of compliance and alleviate some level of the burden in the sector. So from a SABS perspective, from a certification perspective, we are ready to provide these certification management systems, as I've spoken to, 9001, be it as a base, environmental management, occupational health and safety, local content verification. But it requires a collaborative approach. Where possible, you might find that there could be possible duplication that is existing. But in all of this, I think quality of production and products in the market. It's important that to all our clients and any interested party, I think it's an easy option when it gets tough economically, and you do away of the quality line in your budget by saying, I don't need a management system, or therefore I don't need the certification. But it's important that, in our view, we say to continue to remain competitive. I think consistency of your production and consistency of supplying of the products in the market, I think it becomes very, very imperative. Probably among other things, Prasant will talk about, I don't know, whatever this industry contributes in the erection of the roads in our country. But if you were to think about it and quantify the cost of inferior products that are supplied in the construction of some of these infrastructure, really, you don't want to imagine, because it's very, very difficult for the country to recover from such losses. But we are saying, if at the forefront of all of that, inclusive of procurement processes, and we put quality at the forefront, I think we remain the certification body and conformity assessment services of choice in making sure that we continue to run those services. Thanks, Dinesh.
Thank you, Katima.
Thank you, Katima. Thanks.
I'm just getting a bit of an echo. All right, that's been sorted out. Thanks, Katima. I think that, you know, the linkage and really taking time to link the inputs from the colleagues from the different areas, it talks to two key points that you flagged. I think the one around cost of compliance. We just owe it to industry and we owe it to each other to find ways and mechanisms to really impact positively in this area of the cost of compliance. It cannot be seen to be a barrier, and how do we unblock that? The second point, which is equally key, is that of collaboration. I think you've already picked up certain opportunities, certain areas where there's a need in the marketplace, and certainly where SABS can play a key role, where we have the teams already in the marketplace. We have the teams already getting to these different areas of the South African market. And so how do we find ways not to duplicate, but to avoid scenarios where people have to be paying, twice and thrice for the same kind of recognition? So simply put, how do we certify once and that can be recognized across the board is something that we really got to find ways to work together to create that recognition. Katima, thanks for that. I think you've also, given sufficient areas of thought where I'm certain there are going to be questions that come through. Katima, there is an item in the chat bar that talks to a client facing an issue in the certification space, and I think it's something that you can just look into, and we can certainly, outside of this engagement, engage the client directly and find quick resolutions to the gaps that the client might have flagged. But with that said, I'd like to see then beyond if Prasant is still available, and whether we could pick up on the topic that he'd started on digitization. Prasant, if you can come in, over to you. I did see that Prasant rejoined the call. Bjorn, can you just confirm?
Yes, he is there. He's logged in.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, certainly we can, Prasant. We certainly can.
It seems as though I was talking to myself at one point.
We're going to apologize. You've whet our appetite around, the work you've done in the digitization space. I think you mentioned as part of your honors program. And so if you can pick it up from there and share with us the way forward on that. Thanks, Prasant.
Okay. Just to recap, the areas of concern that we have is governance, administration, efficiency, and accountability. And there we're looking at ISO 55001. And the second area of concern is we're not getting value for money. Here we're looking at your construction management systems, SANS 1393. And what I said is we really need collaboration and especially support from SABS. And that's when I said digitization is one of the key instruments that we need to look at as we go forward, and how we can introduce more digitization in the system. And that's where it'll be very important to get the support from SABS, so we do it right the first time, and everything is addressed, where we now improve governance, efficiency, administration, and we have accountability. I can just give you one example. We have a mobile app now for roads. For the first time, you can report a pothole anywhere in the country, and we can allocate it to the correct roads authority. Then we have a second app for the roads authority to report progress on the fixing of the potholes. And then we got other features not yet activated. But one of the features is the street lights, your other problems on the road, traffic signals. And one feature which we've already started using is we're monitoring projects on the ground through the app. So we've automated the payment procedures for them to provide reports and pictures. So that's the area. So construction monitoring and oversight. If you look at those big bridges we're building in the Wild Coast, the surveying was done through digital technology. All the bill of quantities and documents was prepared using the survey results. We didn't have to go and physically do surveys there, so you can see the work we've done there. So as we go back to this thing about collaboration and support from SABS, I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Prashant, thank you so much for that. Certainly, I think all the points that you flagged are indeed noted. Again, the key point coming through is that around collaboration and how we find those mechanisms to work together to take things forward. So I think we're at a pretty interesting platform at the moment, where there's a lot that we have in front of us. It's how do we get together, how do we work together, and how do we find ways to take this forward? I'd like to then, at this point, allow the divisional head for our laboratory services department, Thabo, if you could come in before we then can, open the floor to questions. Thabo, over to you.
No, thanks, Dinesh and colleagues. Yes, and good morning again. My name is Thabo Sipuru. I'm the head of the laboratory services at the SABS. And then I think the previous speakers were able to more or less craft a unique set of arguments in the area of civil. From our end in the testing space, I thought maybe to confirm a few things, that we do have an accredited lab in the space of civil, but civil on its own remains incomplete, because if you think about the building regulations, it covers a range that extend beyond just the civil space, and it covers plumbing and many other areas. And so we have a range of accredited laboratories that provide testing in this space. The second thing that I thought maybe I should mention is that the work we do covers, in summary, about 4 key areas, which is the test offerings we are issuing within the testing space. So the first being, we have testing specifications, and on average, the bulk of the requests that we get are requests that ask for us to test to the full requirements of that specification. And in those instances, we do test and fully and be in a position to issue a statement of conformity. And then this would then, it simply means that we would be able to make a statement on whether the product under test has complied with the requirements of the specification. The second set is instances where test requests are directed by the regulator and or tender requirements for us to be able to test. Even in that second area of testing, we are then able to issue a statement of conformity after testing. The third part is when a client is doing product development and they would want for us to test not to the full requirements of the spec. And in many cases, it may just be a unique request. And we will then review it and look at our capability and capacity. And if in those instances we are then able to provide that service, we then test and issue the test outcomes. In those instances, we are unable to issue a statement of conformity because we have only done what the client would have requested, which is not necessarily aligned to the fuller requirements of the standard. And the fourth being where a client comes in and say, a spec has got about 10 or so parameters, but I'm interested in 4 of those, as an example. And in those instances, we'll then be able to accept that that request, test in line with the requirements of the client. And even in that instance, because we have only tested a few parameters, we, to the exclusion of the rest, we will issue the test results, but not a test report with a statement of conformity. And so, and this is in us responding to the issue that we once had, wherein we, as the SABS, we had said we will no longer test or conduct or perform what we call partial testing. We have since reviewed it and now are issuing it under what we call customer-specific requirements, and we are still then able to enter into some form of an agreement and issue the test results. The type of testing that we do, and I think Katima has already mentioned it, that we do provide product certification as the SABS. And in fact, most of the items, the civil items are in our product certification scheme. And we do test in support of the scheme. The last point, which is a sore point, and I saw in the chat, which talks to the delays. We from time to time, and I think it's an aspect of what the COO was going to be covering, which then reflect the changes that the organization has been undertaking and the impact of those organizational changes on our business. And for that, what we have been able to do is to navigate through the changes without necessarily compromising our technical capability and capacity. But as nature would have it, we have also done a resource analysis and are in the final stages. In fact, we have just finalized the process of ensuring that we adequately resource the various areas to be able to respond to issues of delays in our service levels. And so I do know that particularly in the cement space, that's one area where we have been having a real issue of a longer turnaround times, and we are responding to it. We have actually managed to duplicate the test area to be able to reduce our turnaround times to the acceptable level of about 3 months. We are in the final stages of resourcing that area. In fact, we have everything in place now. We have finalized. In fact, we are finalizing the recruitment process to get the additional people in that space, and they should be able to start in January, and that then would be an area of improvement in our service offering. But in the other areas of the business, we have done a similar exercise to ensure that we then increase our capacity to the levels that will enable us to improve on our turnaround times. I think by and large, the feedback that we have been having from our engagement with our customers is that we technically we have competent people throughout the business, and there are no complaints in that regard, except that there would always be a larger portion of the concerns that we are receiving and we are responding to these issues of delays occasioned throughout the business. And as I've just said, those are the issues that we are really aware of, and we are attending to those at this point. I think, Dinesh, without necessarily having to repeat what the colleagues raised, let me stop it there, and maybe we'll then take it up as we take a round of discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Thabo, and thanks for that context from a testing and LSD perspective. At this stage, I think from the panel engagement perspective, I think all of you have really set the scene for a meaningful discussion that we can now have. There are some questions that have already come up in the chat bar, and I'd request the panelists to just have a quick squiz at that, and we can just pick out some of the main issues. One of the things I'd like to now do is open the floor then to taking some of those questions. Bjorn, if it's possible to then open up such that we can take hands and take questions that come up directly. Will that be possible, Bjorn, from your side?
Yes, give me a second. I will allow all of them.
All right, great. And I think while we're waiting on Bjorn, maybe just 2 points to consider. As I mentioned earlier, our COO has been called into another meeting and may not be able to join us. What I'd like to then do is we're going to take some questions, and we're going to get the panel to address some of the questions that might come up. I will then, just before we close, Katima, I'm going to ask you if you could just give a very short overview in terms of the state of the org review, possibly then also look at the appointment of the SABS board and the progress that we are making when it comes to the appointment of the SABS CEO as well. So I think those are some of the key points that I'd like you to maybe just touch on for us on behalf of the COO, and then I will then close off on the session. But at this point, let's open the floor to questions. There's 2 points I did pick up in the chat bar. The one related to training services that SABS offers, and I can confirm it is something that SABS is certainly still offering. It might, I've just realized as I read the question that it might be because it doesn't appear under the banner of training, as we have now placed this under a division called BSAS, which is our Business Solutions and Advisory Services, in which our training division has been incorporated. One of the things we'll certainly do as part of this process, though, is we will link you directly to the respective training division, and we'll ensure that the support is provided. I'll also note that so that it could be something that other customers could be facing, and so we will need to find a link taking any search for training directly to the BSAS department as we go forward. So I think that's one of the comments that I did see in the chat bar. The one around the issue around testing and or renewal of a certificate or permit. Katima, I think it's specific context that you will require in the certification area. And my recommendation on that will be for you to engage straight after this session, for your team to engage with the representatives from the company so that we can resolve that. Katima, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to look at those comments and whether there's something you want to maybe add in the meantime. Over to you.
Thanks, Dinesh. I did, and thanks for the questions. I'm trying to see so that I don't assassinate your name. The gentleman, Moamba. So those questions are noted. I think certainly I do note that there's one that is related to a renewal of the permit. To the point you made, Dinesh, I'll just get to it after this meeting. But I think in principle, what we are trying to do is part of the changes we are working on is to really talk to make sure that how do we advance service excellence. So Dinesh, I don't want to jump the gun. You sort of threw that one at me to say to comment at the end. Maybe let me pack it for now. But I think what Moamba is raising, I've noted the issue and then I'll follow up on that, including the testing issues that he has raised. And we'll deal with those together with Tabo and really provide a written response on those issues. Thanks, Dinesh.
Thanks for that input, Katima. I think at this point as well, I'd just like to maybe highlight that whilst we will cover it shortly under the, where we are in terms of the org review as an organization, I think it'll be prudent to maybe mention at this point that we have introduced a customer-facing or a customer services arm to our business. And what we're trying to do with situations like this is to make sure that centrally in the organization, we have sight of these kind of gaps. So a query of this nature will go straight to our customer services division. The relevant teams affected by the gap in the service will then provide responses to our customer services department. But we are finding that with that approach, it's a department that hasn't been directly involved in what might have gone wrong, which tends to imply that we are more focused around the solution. And I'm certain in most cases where you don't have a certificate, you need a certificate reissued in the shortest time frame. And so this is the approach our customer services division will then take. However, at the same time, there will be a deep dive whereby the relevant divisions will get together and look at how they are avoiding recurrences of similar issues. So we certainly will be then raising them as formal complaints and making sure that there's proper root cause analysis and correction and corrective actions implemented. So through our customer services department, the core focus will be on correcting the situation and making sure that our clients can continue to trade, but we will then do that deep dive behind the scenes to make sure that the gaps are closed permanently. In saying that, I'd like to then, Bjorn, if you can assist with the hands, if there are specific questions, if we can just flag those so that we could allow the individuals to come in and we can then, they might not also just be questions, but they could even be comments that delegates would like to raise. I think I'd like to open the floor to either of those. Thanks.
Oh, perfect. There was a hand up. Moamba had his hand up. Moamba, I don't know if your question has been answered or you prefer to do it via email.
It has been addressed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then I see a question from Dennis White regarding sign-off of SAC and publication of standards. Maybe this is something for Matlali.
Matlali, would you like to come in on that? Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. Yeah, and I think you might have skipped the other one beyond
Sorry.
to do. Yeah, there was a long one, but let me
Sorry.
maybe start with that one. Yeah, let me start with that, the last one, the delay at SAC. I can assure the members that actually SAC has caught up with all of those delays, so there is absolutely no delay. We are up to date with applications. I mean, I was just quickly just checking what is on the program for SEC, and I see only 4 documents are outstanding. The others are going to be discussed tomorrow at SAC. On the publications, yes, that one we will admit there was really, as the organization was transitioning, for better service delivery, there was just a bit of a delay in that, some other people left, then it had a knock-on effect on processes that we got delayed in issuing of standards or publishing of standards. So for the past couple of weekends, we've been bringing teams here to just catch up with the backlog that was left. We are nearly there. I know the report I got is that it's only 2 SAC meetings where publications that were approved by SAC are yet to be published. We are working on that. The second part maybe to that, which also we are really attending to, was that there was just a glitch in our system in that the document will show that it has been approved by SAC and it has been duly published. But then on our web store, if you're looking for the document, you wouldn't then find it. So we've been working with our external service provider to close that. It is not entirely done, but I can say over 95% has now been closed, and we're just finishing that off, so that we then talk to that question. On the question of the 10400s, how they get delayed by people who are not experts, as I said in my presentation, that we've been listening to our stakeholders, those who've been complaining that we are sitting with people in working groups who are not really experts. So if you look at the draft norm that we are changing, we've included actually a clause there where it may not be as strong as we'd like it to be, but it was a compromise where we've said, we are now saying that working group experts shall have at least 5 years of relevant experience in the project work that is currently under consideration. So meaning that you can't just be nominated to sit there, because what we've picked up as well is most, especially when, and I'm going to use 10400 Party and XA, because I know that was where there was a lot of interest by a lot of our stakeholders, that there were those who had an interest in the work that was done, not necessarily expertise, but because our norm was very broad, clearly said, if you are nominated by the parent committee, then you're good to go. So we then said, let's strengthen that, because even ourselves, apart from the feedback that we got from stakeholders, we asked ourselves to say, but how do we know that this person is an expert? Is it good enough that the committee has nominated you? Hence, Chair, this inclusion now in the draft norm, that as a minimum 5 years relevant experience in that work. So if we're dealing with 10400 Part T, your experience must be aligned to that scope of work. If we're dealing with XA, which may be completely different from T, your expertise must be in that energy efficiency. When we're dealing with water efficiency, your expertise must be aligned there. So this one will then make it easy for us to even verify as SABS whether we do have the right people in working groups. Of course, we said for continuity purposes, if you've been nominated as an expert by your organization, or at least by the committee, and we are satisfied that you do meet the minimum requirements of the 5 years, you can bring somebody from your own organization who is not an expert, but who's somebody who maybe you would regard as a candidate or a learner or a person with lesser experience, so that they are exposed to the work, that there can be continuity. But we say that we would have to arrange with the convener first, so that we don't frustrate the work of the committee. But if you've been brought under that requirement that you are just there to familiarize yourself with the work, then you are an observer, you must keep quiet, you must sit still, so that you don't delay the work of the committee. Thanks, Dinesh. I will pause there.
Thanks, Matlale. Thanks for that. I'd like to maybe give Rodney an opportunity, as one of the panelists. Maybe you want to add to that, Rodney. Over to you.
Yes, thank you. I put my hand up to possibly respond. I fully support and understand what Frans Dekker has raised on these issues. While I hear that the SABS may be introducing requirements for people who've got 5 years experience, it's almost implying the difficulties in these platforms, committees we have. It's almost given them appearance that it's not the it's the unexpert that's causing the problem, for want of a better word. If I look at and I'm conscious of what I'm going to be saying here, if I look at my experience with Part T and also with Part XA, it is the experts which have delayed the process. It's because of the experts don't understand, and Frans has also raised that, don't understand the process of writing a standard. At the end of the day, whether you've got 5 years experience, whether this, it gets down to the convener's role to try and sort this out. But the most difficult situations that I've been in is where two experts are making these problems. If I can just make one comment, it's totally out of line and totally different, but reference was made to the late Folly Brink. And Folly Brink was very well known in this industry. I made reference that the average age of people around the table are 70s or 80s or something like this. And Folly was very passionate about his job, and he wanted to get the standard moving. And he made a comment in one of the committees. He wants to see the standard published before he dies. Regrettably, he did not see that. Because of a legal problem we've got, we can't open up the project on 10.4W. Covered two issues there, apologies, but thank you for that.
Thanks so much for that, Rodney, and I think thanks for that context as well. There's a point that's coming through, and you flagged it. I also don't want this to become a kind of an engagement that's viewed as one-sided. It is. I think we are sitting with some challenges that are being flagged in the standard space, and I think you've almost summarized it as to what extent do we need to make sure that from a convener perspective we have enhanced control or coordination. And I think, Matlale, it might be something that we need to note and deliberate around possible solutions to that concept of the convener's role, and whether there's something can be done to enhance that coordination aspect that comes from that particular role itself. It's come out clearly, that we're sitting with various, call it expertise levels. But I think equally so, there's examples now that show that delays are being caused by experts as well. So how do we then, balance the two? And it's something that we might have to give some attention to and look into some controls around that. So Matlale, if you could please note that, it will be appreciated. Colleagues, there were a few hands, and I now see that we don't have any. So I'd like to maybe just open the floor to, and Bjorn, you'll help me if I've missed any. But
there was a hand of Frans Dekker. Frans, I don't know if you still would like to point something out.
Thanks for the opportunity. I'm not going to switch on my camera at the moment, but yeah, I think Dr. Rodney have basically summarized it just now in my big concern, and that's especially in TC60 with the delays caused there. I was convening quite a number of those standards in the past as an architectural professional, and 10.400 goes about architecture and the way a building has to satisfy the minimum requirements. And I think here is where TC60 has got a unique issue at hand, where they deal with standards that are required in terms of legislation. And the legislation, the National Building Regulations, then put the requirements that or what the standard then needs to address. Now, the biggest issue that we found in the past in 10.400 is that, yes, there are a lot of experts, but they are experts on a component of the building design and not necessarily affair with all the other aspects of designing a building. And what they then raise, or what they then want to do, is actually then in conflict with the other parts of 10400 and not even in line with the NBR. We found that in the past that people are trying to use the SANS 10400 series of actually bringing in requirements that is not in the NBR because they want those requirements to be adhered to, and obviously it's not part of the mandate then given by the NBRs then for that what needs to be in that standard. And that's the biggest issue. And some of these experts, as Dr. Rodney also referred to, will continuously delay a lot of the issues or the development of the standard by not understanding that it is not best practices that you write into a 10400, but absolutely minimum requirements for a local authority then and for a professional then to satisfy the national building regulations. So the biggest issue that I've got is that the involvement, especially from architecture in TC60, is very minimum at the moment. There are a lot of other experts in TC60, but they're not necessarily from architecture. I represent one of the architectural professions. I'm also involved with the South African Council of Architectural Profession in the IDFWs there. And I can see that the lack of architecture involved in especially the 10400 developments is enormous, and it creates a lot of problems because we do now sit there with members on those committees and members on those working groups, like I've said earlier, that's basically experts in a component of the building design, but do not necessarily understand the complete design of buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Frans. Thank you very much for that. I think certainly noted. And, like you've mentioned, I think Rodney's covered it or addressed this in a slightly different way. And I think Matlale has noted as the divisional head for the standards division within SABS, he's noted that there's definitely a need to find some mechanisms to bring this under better control as we go forward. So, if you want to summarize it, experts, we're using the term loosely because it becomes an expert in an area rather than across the board. And how do we then make sure that the standards process is being taken into consideration as we're going through, trying to get to, it was said a little bit earlier, how do we issue a standard quicker, faster? And it becomes absolutely key. We shouldn't have, the scenario where somebody who's put in a huge time and effort doesn't get to see and enjoy the benefit of the publishing of a standard. So how do we find mechanisms to shorten that time frame? And Matlale, it's certainly going to be a challenge that we're putting out to you and maybe your team to come up with some mechanisms around that particular aspect. There were a few other questions that have come up in the chat bar. There's one, and Thabo and team, maybe from the LSD side, if you can be in readiness to maybe just give a response around samples and sample testing. I think because it refers to 6 samples in the cycle, I think it probably is referring to cement testing, but it's something you can look at. But in the meantime, I want to maybe give Ishmael an opportunity to comment, and then Thabo will either come to yourself or you could nominate one of your team to provide a kind of input into that. Ishmael, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning again, colleagues. I would like to respond to Peter's statement about and concern about the 1200 series that is still in existence, or some of them, while we have introduced the SANS 2001 series. It's a very important issue because it's causing confusion in the construction industry amongst the users, the clients. It's something that the Committee 1098 is looking at. One of the areas, particularly one of the components, is the issue of the roads, and looking at how can we collaborate with the COTO, that is the SANRAL, Department of Transport. They are very, they've got well developed standards, but it is not according to the SABS protocol. But the technical conditions, or the technical quality of the manuals are excellent. So we're looking at sort of working and leapfrogging from their inputs in terms of the roads part. One of the challenges is that it's unlike most of the development and revision of the standards, where one and the team members, and I must say we have an excellent team, an experienced team on members on the TC, is the time. Particularly, it's not just about the review of the standards, so you can within a committee or you can give inputs. This particular area, it's something that we need to discuss with, particularly with SABS. We can take it offline. How we're going to approach this, because it's a time issue. Therefore, there's a cost implications, and also, like I said, unlike the other components or the other SAN standards, where we give a comment, we give sort of inputs, and this is the new developments. This particular challenge is, like I said, we need to discuss this with SABS. It is a challenge, and we need to resolve this challenge because it's causing confusion within the industry. The second one is the removal of the measurement and payment from the new standards that those are. That's the 2001 standards in the SABS 1200. They used to be there. And then again, it's about the way that industry is moving towards procurement is the division of methods and payment with your technical standards or the methods of constructing the work. So it's like Peter said, that's the reason why we move away as a technical committee, move away from this. So those are the areas that I wanted to highlight to the committee. It's something that SABS need to take cognizance of. It is a challenge. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Ishmael. I think those comments are certainly noted. I did ask Thabo to just be on standby, but I have seen your response in the chat bar, Thabo. I think you've covered the fact that it's a gap that we've already identified, and that it's something that we've worked on, and there are some solutions in place. Is there anything you want to maybe highlight on that, Thabo, as a final point? Over to you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Dinesh, and thanks, colleagues, for the questions. I think it's Fiona as well as Clarissa on the testing of cement. It's the first one that I think when I made my submission, I had already noted that it's an area of concern that we have already actioned, because it's the feedback that we were getting from clients that the delays that they are or we are experiencing in that space is intolerable. It makes compliance almost impossible. And as a result, we then decided that we need to double our capacity. But we have done already we have already implemented most of the improvements. We have built a newer area, fully commissioned. Pieces of equipment are in. We are finalizing recruitment of the new team that will be resourcing this area, and we want them to start when we start in January. The second area that we also tried to implement, and except that we get we do not necessarily get fuller or at least a directive from clients, is where we have also then implemented a subcontracting model to try and augment our capacity. But as part of our testing protocols, we would not be in a position to subcontract clients' samples without their consent. So if we could also look at that as an area of improvement for the uptake of this subcontracting option, it will go a long way in terms of relieving the lab of the current capacity challenges. But in the coming year, I think we'll be looking towards ensuring that we realize the improvements of the investments that we have already made in the SABS. Thanks, Dinesh and colleagues.
Thank you, Thabo. Thanks for that input, and thanks for closing the loop on it, and especially the emphasis around what we need to then do with that additional solution around subcontracting and the requirement for client approval, so that that process can be pursued and accelerated. So with that said, I think there was one other query relating to training, and I think the link to BSAS and the training manager has been provided. Bjorn, you would have done that already, so that's great. And like I said, we need to just have a look to see whether it's clearer to others that go onto our website, that or maybe we need to clarify that when you do get into BSAS or when you want to find training, it must take you through the BSAS channel itself. So we'll certainly look at that. I'm not seeing any other hands or any other questions. I'm just pausing for a second to see whether we've reached that point of the program where I could allow Katima to come in and just give a short overview on behalf of the COO in terms of the status at SABS regarding the org review and some of the developments with the SABS board and the appointment of a SABS CEO. With me not seeing any new hands, Katima, it's over to you to just do that short address on behalf of the COO. Over to you, Katima.
Thanks, Dinesh. Such a request, one needs at least 2 months notice, Dinesh. They are really above my pay grade. Yeah, I think thanks, Dinesh, and thanks to everyone. I'll be brief on this update. I think it's equally a requirement from a SABS perspective, and also from an accreditation perspective, that from time to time, when there are changes that are taking place in the organization, we also communicate with our stakeholders. And the reason for that is on issues such as the ones that we're seeing on the chat box, where at times the service delivery tends to be disrupted. But I'll borrow from the keywords that were used by Prasant, but even though he was addressing something else, he used the words such as governance and efficiency. And this is exactly what we're trying to do in the organization: restoration of governance and really advancing efficiency. So some of you may be aware that SABS was under administration, and it has since come out of administration since last year, December, on the appointment of the new board by the DTIC minister. So that is in place, and part of the process included the appointment of the CEO, which is currently in process. The board has finalized the process, and all internal processes are taking place up to the minister's office to process that appointment. But organizationally, part of these issues included how we reposition the organization to really advance efficiency and service excellence. So we have redefined our operating model and emphasis on making sure that how do we then make sure that we put our customers and stakeholders at the forefront in rendering our services. I mean, all these discussions that are coming out in the standards development, central to them is efficiency and really making sure that the standards we develop and publish are fit for purpose and provide a level of relevance rather in the market. That's exactly what we're trying to do. And of course, the conformity assessment front on the service excellence. So in there, what we try to do is we are advanced in a centralization model, where on the conformity assessment services front and really making sure that when we adopt a one SABS approach in the context of How do we have a single view of a customer and stakeholders? So when you have these inquiries, as we see on the meeting chat, you need to have a contact point where you directly go and you know for a specific sector who is your contact person, so that all your issues can be coordinated there. How we were structured in the past, a bit disjointed and fragmented. Where to get a particular answer, you have to speak to 3 or 4, 5 people. It can really be frustrating. But part of streamlining is to exactly do that. Drive the centralization, one entry into the business to make sure that all your issues are coordinated at a central point. So this is what this change seeks to achieve. So we had to overhaul the entire organization, and to the point that was made by my colleague Thabo, there's been movement of colleagues in between the organization. And really, in certain instances, it had an impact on the service delivery or for some of the areas. But we've done now with the process of placing all employees in the organization. So it's only a few vacancies where we may have to really bolster a capacity, maybe by drawing from externally in certain areas to really make sure that we are properly capacitated. So these are the changes that basically we're trying to advance. In the auditing space, we've created a pool of auditors, elimination of this silo approach where you have the Western Cape auditors, Gauteng auditors, and Durban auditors, etc. But how do we advance centralization and also ensure effective rotation of these auditors throughout the country, and also managing the principle of familiarity in the organization? So all of these are intended really to make sure that there is efficiency in service delivery of our work, but of importance, make sure that also from a stakeholder perspective, I saw there's a stakeholder manager also here, is also on the call. We didn't introduce the gentleman, Dinesh, but the spirit of it is to see how do we centralize these activities so that there is one entry to the organization. I think the issues on the standards development side, Matlali will agree with me, Dinesh. I don't know how he made it, and he's still there in the standards development, but listening to the gentleman, they're saying on average, age-wise, it's about 70 to 80 years of experience or average age that you find in them. And often the challenge we are faced with is it is not a sexy space for the young generation to really get involved in that environment. And the drive really is, how do we really drive this appetite to make sure that to also enable new entrants, a person as young as myself also to take active participation in that space, but also including the involvement of women in this environment. So yes, these are all things that we are all collectively working towards and really making sure that these standards are fit for purpose and are able to enable the economy to function properly. Dinesh, in summary, that is basically where we are from the changes that have taken place in the organization. Thanks.
Great stuff. Thanks, Katima. I think just the two other points that would be just useful to flag as one, it's just to clarify that the SABS has appointed a board, and the board has been in place now just only 11 months. So that much we can confirm. And the very last stage is that we are in the final stages now of the interviews and hopefully then the appointment of a full-time CEO of the organization. At this point, we have Dr. Sadhvir Bisun as the acting CEO, but the final stages is the permanent appointment of a CEO, and that then really gives us the foundation and springboard to really start to take SABS forward in line with the new model that Katima has alluded to. So with that said, I think it brings us really to the tail end of our program itself. And I would like to, at this point then, take the opportunity. I'd like to ask all panel members to please switch on their cameras, if you can, just for the concluding stage of the program itself. But like I said, with that said, I'd really like to thank all of you for joining the session. I want to kick off and thank my panelists. They have really been strong. They've really been carrying a huge amount of insight into the business that they represent, and certainly they've been playing a key role in uplifting and taking SABS forward. So we really want to thank everyone for their contribution. And to my panelists, if I could just allow for a round of applause, please, to the panelists. You've been sterling. You've really offered a good general support, and I think you clearly understand your business areas. So congratulations, guys, and thank you for that. To you as the audience, those that have joined the platform virtually, we really appreciate your input, the questions that you've raised, your comments and your input have certainly been valuable, and certainly gives us an opportunity as a SABS to look at how we can improve our business as a whole. We certainly will give consideration to all the points that have come up, and we further commit to making sure that where you've raised comments in the chat bar, that you do receive a written response to those comments itself. So with that said, thank you all very, very much, and I'd like to then bring this third roundtable to a close. Thank you, and thanks for your time. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.